Hello everybody, I am Tom and you are watching my speculative class guide series for Larian Studios' upcoming Baldur's Gate 3. As noted, because Baldur's Gate 3 is not out yet and we don't know everything, this video is speculative. This is based off the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition ruleset, which Larian has said they're going to base their own ruleset off as closely as practical, so I feel pretty confident using it as a baseline for these videos. If you're unaware of any of the basic concepts around D&D or Baldur's Gate more generally, I have a tutorial kind of video about the basics of D&D that you can find right here, or in the description. But without further ado, today we're going to take a look at... The Fighter is the martial class in Dungeons & Dragons. They're probably going to be the most versatile class in Baldur's Gate 3. Fighters are proficient in all weapons and all armor in the game, and this means that you can pick and choose how you want to build your fighter. You can favor ranged weaponry and maybe take a large melee weapon and run straight into the fray. Any way you want to do it, fighters have the ability. As always, we'll start by listing the class features in order of acquisition, followed by my thoughts on the class as a whole and some suggestions on how to build one in Baldur's Gate 3. So, starting out with the base features of the fighter class, we have the hit dice of a 1d10. This means that at first level, you have 10 hit points plus your constitution modifier, and each level above 10, you get to roll a d10 or take the average of 6, and add your constitution modifier, and that's how much additional HP you will get per level. As I said, proficiencies, all armor and shields, as well as all simple weapons and all martial weapons. You can use anything you want. They don't get any tool proficiencies, and their saving throws are proficient in strength and constitution. As far as skills go, you get to choose 2 from acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, perception, or survival. And starting at level 1, you get to choose a fighting style. Although the fighter class can indeed wield any weapon and don any armor, they are very specialized generally in a particular weapon. They can use everything, but there's one that they favor the most. There are 6 options in the player's handbook to choose from. Firstly, we have archery, which means you gain +2 bonus to attack rolls you make with ranged weapons. Very good, it just means you hit more often. Defense means while you're wearing any kind of armor, you gain +1 bonus to your AC, which makes you harder to hit. You have dueling. When you're wielding a melee weapon in one hand and no other weapons, you gain +2 bonus to damage rolls with that weapon. I believe this does work with a shield. I don't think a shield counts as a weapon, I think it counts as armor, so if you have a weapon in one hand and a shield in the other, you get extra damage. Quite good. Next we have great weapon fighting. When you roll a 1 or a 2 on the damage die for an attack you make with a melee weapon, and you're wielding that melee weapon with 2 hands, you can re-roll the die. You have to use the new roll of whatever it is, so if you roll a 1 again, bad luck. But that means that on average you're going to be doing more damage because the minimum damage you can roll is 3 rather than 1 or a 2. I mean, when you re-roll, you can re-roll a 1 or a 2. In fact, you can get technically lower damage if you roll a 2 and then you roll it again and you get a 1 instead. Still worth it. Increases your damage output quite significantly. Next we have protection. When a creature you can see attacks a target other than you that's within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on the attack roll. You must be wielding a shield. This one's kinda weird. It's very wordy, but what this essentially means is that you and an ally are both next to an enemy, and the enemy attacks your ally, you can give the enemy disadvantage, so they have to roll twice and take the lower of the values. And finally we have 2-weapon fighting. When you engage in 2-weapon fighting, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of your second attack. Now, what this means is 2-weapon fighting, it means you have a weapon in both hands. Ordinarily, in Dungeons & Dragons, and I assume in Baldur's Gate 3, when you attack with when you have a weapon in each hand, you can attack with both. However, the second attack you do with your offhand doesn't get your ability modifier. If you take this, it does. So it increases your damage quite significantly. Also at first level, you gain the Second Wind feature, which means once per long rest or short rest, as a bonus action, you can regain 1d10 plus your fighter level in hit points. This is very useful, particularly for melee fighters. Health recovery is amazing, and essentially you can just heal 1d10 plus your fighter level. So if you're a level 3 fighter, you can roll a d10 and you get 3 plus whatever the roll is, HP back. It's great, you can do that once per rest. It's amazing. At second level, you get what in my mind is probably the most iconic feature of the fighter, which is the action surge. So once per long rest or short rest, you can take an additional action. It's very simple, and yet it's incredibly powerful, this ability. So essentially, I can run in, I can attack, I can just decide, well, this thing's nearly dead, I'm going to use my action surge, and then I can just attack again. Or, are very low on health and you're next to an enemy, you can drink a potion to heal, use your action surge, and then attack. Or hell, drink a potion, use your action surge, drink another potion. There is a lot of variety of things you can do with the action surge. It's an incredibly powerful ability, and yet it's very simple. It's one of probably the simplest abilities in the game. You just get another action. Then when we go on to level 3, you unlock your subclass, or your martial archetype. I'll skip over these for now, as usual, and we'll come back to them in a minute when we go through the rest of the class abilities. You go at level 4, and again at level 8, you gain an ability score improvement, or a feat of your choice, as with all classes. It is worth noting, however, that the fighter also gets this at level 6, so you can increase your abilities even further. At level 5, the fighter gets an extra attack feature, so what this allows them to do is if you make the attack action on your turn, you can instead take 2 attacks, so you attack once and attack again. Very, very good. As you can imagine, combining that with Action Surge, that's 4 attacks per turn at level 5. Quite good. And finally, at level 9, the fighter gets the Indomitable feature. This allows you to reroll, you must take the second roll, any failed saving throws. You can do this once per long rest. This has always struck me as kind of like a rather boring feature. It is quite useful, but it still seems kinda lackluster compared to a lot of the other class features you get. But moving on, we can go on to the martial archetypes for now. First up, we have the Champion. Champions are by far the simplest of the martial archetypes. That, however, doesn't mean that they're bad. A champion focuses on raw physical prowess, and doing as much weapon damage as possible per round. At level 3, when you choose this archetype, you gain Improved Critical. This means that you get a critical hit, doubling your damage dice, if you roll a 19 or a 20, making your critical chance 10% rather than 5%. It's kind of a significant upgrade when you think about it in percentage. Saying you crit on a 19 or a 20 sounds cool, but when you think about it, ordinarily you have a 5% chance for a crit, now you just have a 10% chance. Much better. At level 7, a strength, dex, or constitution check that you make when you're not proficient in it, you add half your proficiency bonus to it anyway. Additionally, when you make a running long jump, the distance that you cover increases by a number of feet equal to your strength modifier. So, for instance, if you have 18 strength, that means you have +4 modifier, which means you can jump an additional 4 feet compared to other characters. And finally, at level 10, you choose an additional fighting style from those listed before. So, let's say you took archery, you could instead then add defense over the top of it, so you could have both. It's quite good. And that's it for the champion. As I said, they're very, very simple. However, they're also quite good. You're going to be doing a lot more damage on average with a champion than pretty much any other class. Barbarian may outpace them, but as far as like raw physical damage, they're pretty damn good. Next up, we have Battle Master. A Battle Master is a true strategist. They call shots and they aid their allies throughout the battlefield by telling them where to go and how to get there, and they can use their weapon in special ways to control the battlefield. These, I would say, is probably the most complicated fighter. In fact, I was going to say the most complicated fighter subclass. Honestly, one of the most complicated subclasses in the entire game. It's pretty ridiculous. But at level 3, when you choose this archetype, you gain proficiency in one type of artisan's tools. This seems a bit random without reading the flavor text around the Battle Master, but this is to simulate that as a Battle Master, you not only study the blade and how to use your weapons really well, but you also study the history and the culture of warfare. So it's kind of showing a bit more of a cultured character rather than just one that's really good at fighting. They're really good at fighting, but they also understand war on a more political level. You also gain combat superiority dice. Now this is where it becomes complicated. It's one of the most complicated subclass features, I think, in the entire game. But it's not too hard, and I'll try my best to explain it as best as I can. Alright, so you get these superiority die, which allow you to use specific maneuvers that you can do during combat. You learn 3 of the maneuvers at level 3, and you gain an additional 2 at level 7, and then another 2 at level 10. I'll go over all the listed possible maneuvers later on, but first I'll go over how you activate them and what superiority dice actually are. So starting at level 3, when you choose a subclass, you have 4 superiority dice to expend. You gain another one at level 7, but some maneuvers use these dice simply as tokens, i.e. use this maneuver and expends a superiority dice. Others, however, make you roll the dice. The dice are d8s, at level 10 they become d10s, so they actually upgrade their value as they go higher, as you get higher in levels. And still others make your opponent make a saving throw. Thankfully, a lot of this stuff is going to be handled in the back end in Baldur's Gate 3, like the game will just do it for you. So as a player, you won't have to think about a whole lot of the nitty-gritty of how the dice are actually rolling and calculating, but to suffice it to say, it's quite complex, the amount of things that can possibly happen. And you will see this will make a bit more sense when I actually go through the maneuvers you can use. But at level 7, you gain the feat Know Your Enemy. By spending some time interacting with or just observing a creature outside of combat, you can learn certain things about them. The DM, or in this case the game, will tell you things about the creature. It can tell you whether you are equal, superior, or inferior. So strength score, dexterity score, constitution score, armor class, current hit points, total class level, or fighter class level. So what this essentially means is, say you see, I don't know, a man walking around who you potentially are gonna fight. He's a guard or something. You can look at him and observe him for a bit, and then the game will be able to tell you whether or not your strength score is higher or lower than yours, whether his constitution score is higher or lower than yours. It's a weird feature. I'm kind of interested to see how it'll be implemented in a video game, because it's one of these ones where it's very, statistics focused. So when you're playing D&D and you've got like you've got all your numbers and things in front of you and you can kind of compare them directly to the enemy, it gives you a kind of general idea of whether or not they're weaker or stronger than you. In a game sense, I guess they might be able to do the same thing, but it'll be interesting. I want to see how they do it. But next, I'm going to go over onto the actual maneuvers that you can do. I'm just going to read these verbatim, as there are a lot of them. They'll be on screen as I read them, so if you wish you can pause and read through them if I'm going through them too fast, but I'm just going to read through all of them in alphabetical order, starting with Commander's Strike. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can forego one of your attacks and use a bonus action to direct one of your companions to strike. When you do so, choose a friendly creature who you can see or hear you and expend one superiority dice. That creature can immediately use its reaction to make a one-weapon attack, adding the superiority dice to the attack's damage roll. Next, we go on to Disarming Attack. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend one superiority die in an attempt to disarm the target, forcing it to drop one item of your choice that it's holding. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll, and the target must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, it drops the object you chose. The object lands at its feet. Again, this one's going to be interesting. I think it's probably going to limit it to weapons in Baldur's Gate 3. It's probably hard to have like a pop-up window or something saying what are they holding that you want them to drop. And in most cases, when you're fighting someone, it's going to be a weapon that they're holding. Next, we have Distracting Strike. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend one superiority die to distract the creature, giving your allies an opening. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll. The next attack roll against the target by an attacker other than you has advantage, if the attack is made before the start of your next turn. Next is Evasive Footwork. When you move, you can expend one superiority dice, rolling the die and adding the number rolled to your AC until you stop moving. This is mainly to get around attacks of opportunity, usually. And next we have Feinting Attack. You can expend one superiority dice and use a bonus action on your turn to feint, choosing one creature within 5 feet of you as your target. You add advantage on your next attack roll against the creature this turn. If the attack hits, add your superiority die to the attack's damage roll. So you do like a kind of like dip, dive and dodge, and then you can hit them again. Goading Attack. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend one superiority die to attempt to goad the creature into attacking you. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll, and the target must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the target has disadvantage on all attack rolls against targets other than you until the end of the next turn. Next, we have Lunging Attack. When you make a melee weapon attack on your turn, you can expend one superiority dice to increase your reach for that attack by 5 feet. If you hit, you add the superiority dice to the attack's damage roll. Next, we have Maneuvering Attack. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend one superiority dice to maneuver one of your comrades into a more advantageous position. You add the superiority dice to the attack's damage roll, and you choose a friendly creature who you see, that can see or hear you. That creature can use its reaction to move up to half its speed without provoking attacks of opportunity from the target of your attack. Next, we have Menacing Attack. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend one superiority die to attempt to frighten the target. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll, and the target must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, it is frightened of you until the end of your next turn. Next, we have Parry. When another creature damages you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction and expend one superiority die to reduce the damage of the number you roll on your superiority die plus your dex modifier, so you can reduce the damage you take from an attack. Precision Attack. When you make a weapon attack roll against a creature, you can expend one superiority die to add it to the roll. You can use this maneuver before or after making the attack roll, but before any of the attacks are applied. Next we have Pushing Attack. This one's relatively simple. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend one superiority die to attempt to drive the target back. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll, and if the target is large or smaller, this is an interesting thing. Large is like a category of sizes, but there's categories. Essentially, large is something up to about 12 feet tall, thereabouts. Something that size or smaller, it must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, you push the target back 15 feet away from you, which is a significant distance. Next, we have Rally. On your turn, you can use a bonus action to expend one superiority die to bolster your resolve of one of your companions. When you do so, choose a friendly creature you can see or hear you. The creature gains temporary hit points equal to your superiority die roll plus your charisma modifier. And next we have Riposte. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction and expend one superiority die to make a melee weapon attack against the creature. If you hit, you add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll. Sweeping Attack. When you hit a creature with a melee weapon attack, you can expend 1 superiority die to attempt to damage another creature within the same attack. Choose another creature within 5 feet of the original target and within your reach. If the original attack roll would hit the second creature, it takes damage equal to the number of your roll on your superiority die. The damage is of the same type dealt by the original attack. That's very, very wordy. Essentially what that means is if there's 2 enemies standing next to each other and you attack, you can expend a superiority die to do damage to the main one you attacked and the one that you hit that's standing next to it. So it's like a big arcing axe swing or something is the idea. And finally, we have the trip attack. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend 1 superiority die to attempt to knock the target down. You add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll, and if the target is large or smaller, it must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, you knock the target prone. So you just trip them over. But with that, all the maneuvers are listed. We can now move on to the final archetype, which is the Eldritch Knight. The Eldritch Knight is the classic spell sword. They're fighters who wield some limited arcane magic to give them an edge on the battlefield. At level 3, when you take this subclass, you gain the ability to cast spells. Firstly, you learn 2 wizard cantrips. At level 10, you learn 1 more cantrip, once again from the wizard spell list. The table up now will show how many spells the knight will know, as well as how many spell slots the Eldritch Knight has per level. All expended spell slots are regained after a long rest, as with most classes, and all the spells you know must come from Abjuration or Evocation schools of magic. Abjuration is protection spells, and Evocation is elemental damage spells. An exception to this is that when one of the spells you learn at level 3 and another one you learn at level 8 can be from any school of magic. But there's only 2 spells that you learn, at least in Baldur's Gate 3, assuming the level limit is still 10. There's some questions about that, by the way. It may be a bit higher, a bit lower, we don't really know yet. But they're still thinking about level cap for Baldur's Gate 3, apparently. At level 3 and level 8, you get a spell each that can be from any school. It doesn't have to be from Abjuration or Evocation. It's also worth noting here that Intelligence is your spellcasting ability. As such, if you plan on going for this archetype of Fear Fighter, you should probably have probably your second highest score would likely be Intelligence. You want Intelligence to be relatively high if you're going for Eldritch Knight. Additionally, at 3rd level, you can create a weapon bond. Once you have bonded with a weapon, you can do this with up to 2 weapons, and they can be swapped out, either one of them, over a short rest. So over a short rest, you can bond with another weapon. But when you're bonded, you cannot be disarmed unless you're incapacitated. So if you're knocked unconscious, you can still be disarmed, obviously. And as a bonus action, you can summon the weapon to your hand as long as both you and the weapon are on the same plane of existence. Which, I'm going to assume that pretty much all of Baldur's Gate 3 is going to take place on the same plane of existence. I assume most of it is going to take place on the prime material plane, which is essentially Earth, or the real world as it were. But also, at level 7, as an Eldritch Knight, you can gain War Magic. This allows you to attack with a weapon as your bonus action if you spend your action casting a cantrip. So, if you cast the Firebolt cantrip as your action, you can then take a weapon attack. It's quite good. Just means you can do more damage. And finally, at level 10, you gain Eldritch Strike, which means when you hit a creature with your weapon, it has disadvantage on the saving throw for a spell that you cast on it by the end of your next turn. So, for instance, if I hit a creature a couple of times with my sword, as I can do as a fighter, and then the next turn I want to hit it with a spell, it's more likely that the spell's going to be effective when I use it the next turn. It's a relatively passive ability that you're not going to have a lot of active use for, but it's very, very good nonetheless. And with that, all the subclasses are gone through, so onto my thoughts and suggestions. As I said earlier in the video, I feel like Fighter is probably the most versatile class. And that's reflected in my recommendations here, or more precisely, my lack thereof of recommendations. Either Strength or Dexterity is probably going to be a primary ability score, but that's based entirely on what weapon you're using. If you're using a bow, you'll want Dexterity. If you're using a greatsword, you'll want Strength. Beyond that, Intelligence is probably a must if you're going for the Eldritch Knight archetype. And for melee fighters, Constitution is always a good choice. If you're next to enemies and getting hit, you want to have a lot of health. As far as race goes, any really do here. It depends, again, on what archetype you want to go for, or what weapon you want to use. It really depends. The fighter is one of the simplest classes to learn, and as such, there are many possible builds for them. My recommendation would be, when you're making a fighter, think about the role you want them to fill in your group. Are you in need of a tank so that your squishy spellcasters are safe in the back, or perhaps you need someone in the backline shooting a bow so that they can get rid of the enemy spellcasters. The fighter class has a lot of options, and as such, it can fit pretty much wherever you need it to be. But that's pretty much it for the fighter. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time with the monk? A, B, C, D, E, F. G H I J K L M. Yeah, monk. That's a lot of letters in between F and M that just doesn't have a class associated with it, but there it is. Monk is the next class, I'm pretty sure. Well, that one will be a fun one. In any case, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.